This is another podcast from Alpha Business Media. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking you high into the Himalayas, to Nepal. You might know it as the roof of the world. And here, agriculture isn't just, part of the economy. It's really the core of life for so many. Over 2/3 of working people are involved in it. But, and this is what we're digging into today, this absolutely vital sector is facing, a kind of double challenge. It's pretty unprecedented. First up, there's the reality of climate change. And for farmers in Nepal, this isn't some future worry. It's happening right now, every day. We're talking about average temperatures possibly jumping by almost 6 degrees Celsius by 2090. Just think about that impact on crops. It weakens them, makes them way more susceptible to pests, and just throws off the whole growing cycle they've relied on for generations. And then add to that maybe 10-20% less rain overall each year. So you get more droughts, but also these devastating floods when the rain does come. It's a really tough environmental situation. Okay, so that's one side of the coin. The other is this really interesting social change happening, something our sources are calling the feminization of agriculture. What's happening is young men are leaving the farms. They're migrating maybe to cities, maybe even out of the country, looking for other work. And that leaves the day-to-day running of the farms increasingly to women, older people, and also members of lower castes. Now, these are groups that historically haven't always had easy access to things like, information or credit or even secure land rights. It's a massive shift.
And that's absolutely crucial, isn't it? Because that social dynamic completely changes the game for innovation. It means we can't just throw any fancy new technology at the problem. The solutions that are actually going to work need to navigate around those existing barriers. They have to be low cost, they need to be low labor because of the workforce shift, and ideally not require tons of specialized training. This is really where smart agriculture comes into play. And it's not always about the highest tech. Sometimes it's about the right tech, the adaptable solution.
Exactly. So that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to unpack how Nepal is kind of becoming this fascinating test case, a potential blueprint for a more sustainable, more resilient way of farming. It's being driven by these really accessible, targeted innovations. Some are high-tech, like mobile apps. Others are surprisingly low-tech but effective, like new ways of managing soil. We're going to explore how all these players, the farmers, these local startups, the NGOs, even the government, are interacting to create, hopefully, a lifeline for agriculture there. Okay, so let's start with something many of us take for granted, but for a farmer in rural Nepal, it's becoming a powerful tool, the mobile phone. For people who used to rely just on, intuition or maybe methods passed down generations, having information on a phone is revolutionary. We're seeing this whole little ecosystem of apps pop up, Smart Krishi, Ifa Krishi, Nepali Krishi. They offer things like real-time market prices, weather forecasts, places to ask experts questions.
Yeah, and one that really stands out in the research is a platform called GeoKrishi. It's described as Nepal's first properly integrated, data-driven digital agriculture platform. Their main goal really is to break down those barriers. We talked about the financial ones, the technical ones, even cultural resistance sometimes. And the really clever part seems to be this geotagging feature. Every farm registered gets tagged. So the advice isn't generic. It's super specific, tailored to the microclimate, the soil type, right down to that individual farmer's plot. That's a huge leap forward.
That precision sounds amazing. But what really struck me about GeoKrishi is that it's not just the app. They seem to have built this whole support system around it because they know farmers face real hurdles. Maybe they're not comfortable with tech, maybe they don't trust it yet, or maybe the internet connection is just bad. How does that support structure actually work?
It's quite comprehensive, actually.
Yeah.
So you have the basic GeoKrishi Farm app for the farmers themselves. And get this, it can help diagnose plant diseases or pests just from a photo upload. Yeah. Then there's a version called GeoKrishi XEX for agricultural extension workers, the agronomists out in the field, and GeoKrishi Enterprise for farmer cooperatives or even local government bodies, so the information flows. And crucially, they have this 3-tier call center. Level 1 operators handle basic queries, Level 2 connects farmers to local experts, and Level 3 can bring in leading agricultural scientists for really tricky problems. It's a recognition that the tech alone isn't enough. You need that human support wraparound.
Can you give us an example? Maybe bring it to life with a specific farmer.
Sure. There's the story of Biggin. He's a 30-year-old farmer down in Madhya province. He was really struggling, with the weather being so unpredictable, and he admitted he was often using the wrong pesticides, kind of guessing, wasting money, potentially harming his crops. He heard about GeoKrishi from an NGO working locally. He said, at first I wasn't sure, a bit skeptical. But then his rice got sick. He took a photo, uploaded it to the app, and within minutes he got back a clear diagnosis and a specific treatment plan. right there on his phone.
And did it actually make a difference? What were the results for him?
Apparently quite significant. Began reported that because he was getting the right advice at the right time, his costs for dealing with plant and even livestock diseases dropped by about 40%.
40%. That's huge for a small farmer.
Exactly. It's real money back in his pocket, direct economic benefit. And thinking bigger picture, Geokrishi's model seems built for sustainability. They partner with farmer co-ops, with municipalities. They've even worked with mobile operators to get subsidized data plans for farmers. And for those without smartphones, they offer SMS alerts. So they're trying to reach everyone. They got support from the GSMA Innovation Fund, which helped them scale up. Now they have something like 145,000 farmers on the platform. It really underscores that point. Successful innovation in this context isn't just selling a product. It's about providing a whole service, knowledge, support right to the end user.
Okay, so from these small screens making a big difference, let's shift focus to something, well, physically bigger that's also changing things in Nepal's fields. Drones, unmanned aerial vehicles. They're moving pretty quickly from being sort of a novelty to a really essential tool, especially, it seems, for spraying, high-precision spraying.
Yeah, and when you look at the efficiency gains, the numbers are, frankly, quite startling. Take water use. Drones can cut water consumption for spraying by 80 to 90%.
80 to 90%. How?
It's the way they spray. They create these incredibly fine droplets around 50 microns compared to maybe 500 microns from a traditional manual sprayer. Much less water needed, much less runoff. And because it's so precise, you use less chemical to maybe 25–30% less. It hits the target, not the farmer, not the surrounding environment, and the time saving. This is critical given those labor shortages we mentioned. One drone can apparently spray an acre in just 5 to 7 minutes.
5 to 7 minutes. Compared to what?
Compared to a person maybe managing only 3 or 4 acres in an entire day of hard labor. It's a massive difference in productivity. Plus, the safety aspect. The farmer isn't walking through clouds of potentially hazardous chemicals. That's a huge improvement in occupational health.
Okay, so spraying is a big one. But these drones, these eyes in the sky, they do more than just spray, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're becoming these multitasking tools. They can capture real-time aerial imagery for monitoring fields, mapping boundaries, even analyzing soil conditions to some extent. You can monitor crop health as the season progresses, spot problems early. Some systems can even do things like accurately count seedlings after planting. There's a program called Cervero. It's a partnership between NASA and ISAMOD, the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development based in Kathmandu. They've adapted tools to use drone and satellite data for mapping rice paddy areas much more accurately than old ground surveys. And it goes beyond farming, too. Drones were apparently really valuable after the big 2015 earthquake for assessing damage quickly, and today they're used after landslides, and even for things like reforestation, using drones for what they call broadcast seeding, to scatter tree seeds over hard-to-reach degraded areas.
That's incredibly versatile. So how are farmers actually getting access to this drone technology? Is there support available?
There seems to be a mix. On the government side, there's the Prime Minister's Agricultural Modernization Project, PMP. In certain designated zones, like Chitwan District, known for its farming, PMP actually provides quite a hefty subsidy, like 85%, for farmer groups to purchase drones.
85%? Wow.
Yeah, but buying is still a big step. So, importantly, there's also this growing private sector ecosystem, local startups. Companies like Nepal Flying Labs, DronePal, Maduka Drone Services, they're offering drone services for hire, so farmers can rent a drone with an operator, usually for a per-acre fee.
How much does that cost, roughly?
The sources mentioned figures around 750 to 950 Nepali rupees per acre, so around, what, $6 to $8 maybe? Makes it much more accessible than buying the whole unit. They also offer services like agronomic surveys using the drone data.
Right, so you don't need to own one to benefit. That makes sense. But smart farming isn't all about drones and apps, is it? You mentioned earlier that sometimes the innovations are more grounded, combining traditional knowledge with newer science, maybe focusing on the soil itself.
Exactly. And this brings us to some really interesting work being done by an organization called IDE, International Development Enterprises. They've been promoting something called trichovermicompost.
Trichovermicompost. Okay, break that down for us.
So vermicompost is basically using earthworms to break down organic waste manure, plant residues, into really high-quality compost. That part's fairly well known. But the tricho part is the key innovation here. They enrich this compost with a specific type of beneficial fungus, Trichoderma viride. This fungus is a natural powerhouse. It actively suppresses many common soil-borne fungi that cause diseases in plants. So you're not just fertilizing, you're also adding a layer of natural disease protection right into the soil. It's quite elegant.
And have they seen results with this?
Yes, they ran a pilot project in Circuit District involving over 2,000 farmers. And the results were pretty impressive. They reported a 15% average increase in crop yields for the farmers using it. Plus, the project produced over 68 tons of this enriched compost and actually created 22 new local jobs related to its production.
15% yield increase is solid. But I'm thinking back to our earlier discussion about the feminization of agriculture. How does something like making compost fit into that picture?
Now this is where this particular innovation becomes really compelling from a social perspective. Producing trichovermicompost is almost perfectly suited to the situation of many women farmers in rural Nepal. It doesn't require a huge cash investment to get started. You don't need large plots of land. You can do it in small pits or containers near the home. And it doesn't involve extremely heavy physical labor. This means women can manage it alongside their other household and farming duties. It becomes a viable home-based microenterprise. It gives them new skills, a source of independent income, and that, in turn, enhances their status and decision-making power within the family and the community. It's practical empowerment.
And is there a market for this compost if they make more than they need?
Absolutely. That's a key part of the model. Farmers typically use maybe 30–40% on their own fields. The rest, the surplus, they can sell to neighbors. And because chemical fertilizers are often expensive and sometimes hard to get in Nepal, there's strong demand for good quality organic fertilizer like this. It provides a stable, additional income stream. The projection mentioned was that farmers could potentially earn an extra $300 USD a year from selling the surplus by 2025. That's significant extra income.
So it's creating its own little local market.
Exactly. A local circular economy boost. And it really highlights this crucial point about what affordable means in the context of Nepal. It's not just about the purchase price being low. And innovation also has to be affordable in terms of, well, cognitive load. How easy is it to learn and use? And how easy is it to maintain? A cheap tool that's complicated or breaks down easily isn't really accessible. That's why IDE emphasizes that vermicomposting is easy to operate and low maintenance. It connects back to what Geokrishi does too, right? Offering SMS alerts for basic phones, doing face-to-face workshops. They understand that true accessibility lies at that intersection of financial and cognitive simplicity.
Okay, we've heard some genuinely inspiring examples, the apps, the drones, this enriched compost, but we need to be realistic too. The sources are quite clear that scaling these things up across the whole country, well, it's not straightforward. They use the phrase littered with significant obstacles. Promising pilots often hit a wall.
Yes, that's the tough reality. Despite the potential, there are major systemic hurdles. We can group them into maybe 4 main areas based on the analysis. First, there's a fundamental infrastructure deficit. Think about running digital agriculture platforms when only about 65% of the population even has internet access.
Right.
And in rural areas, electricity supply can be really unstable. Even basic things like poor road networks make logistics, getting supplies in, products out, even just getting trainers to villages much harder.
Yeah.
You're building on shaky ground.
Okay, infrastructure is one. What else?
Second big one is financial restrictions. The upfront cost of tech, even subsidized drones or equipment, is still a major barrier for most farmers who operate on tiny margins. And this is compounded by the fact that land holdings are often very small and fragmented. A farmer might only have, half an acre split into different plots. That makes it hard for them to justify a big investment, and it also makes it difficult to get loans from traditional banks. They often lack the kind of collateral banks want. So only about 40% of farmers have access to formal credit. Many end up relying on informal lenders who charge incredibly high interest rates. It's a debt trap risk.
So money is a major issue. What's the third category of obstacle?
That would be the social and human factors. We touched on digital literacy. Many farmers, especially older ones or those in remote areas, lack the skills or confidence to use new digital tools effectively. Training is essential, but often inadequate. There's also, understandably, some skepticism towards new technologies. Maybe they've tried something before that didn't work out, or they worry about becoming dependent on outside companies. And there are real concerns about data privacy and security. Farmers worry about who owns the data collected from their farms and how it might be used. Building trust is absolutely vital.
Okay, infrastructure, finance, social factors. What's the fourth one?
This one is maybe the most complex. Politics and bureaucracy. It's kind of ironic, really. The Nepalese government, on one hand, is a major promoter of agricultural modernization. They launch these big programs like PMAMP, offer subsidies, set up special agricultural zones. But on the other hand, the bureaucratic hurdles could be immense. The sources paint a picture of the government also being the main brake on innovation.
How so? Can you give an example?
The drone example is just astonishing. To legally fly an agricultural drone in Nepal, you apparently need to get permits from 12 different government departments.
12.
12, including multiple ministries, the Civil Aviation Authority, local district offices. It's described as a real labyrinth.
So you have this absurd situation where one government agency might be giving you a subsidy to buy a drone, while a dozen other agencies make it incredibly difficult and time-consuming to actually use it legally. It's a massive disconnect between stated policy goals and on-the-ground reality.
Wow, that does sound like a major bottleneck. Okay, so let's try and pull this all together then. Our deep dive into Nepal's agricultural innovation landscape shows a country really at a crossroads, doesn't it? We've seen these fantastic examples, geokrishi's digital ecosystem, the efficiency of drones, IDE's clever biofertilizer. They prove that targeted, locally appropriate innovations can work, even under tough conditions. They can boost yields, cut costs, and crucially, empower those groups who've often been marginalized, especially women farmers. Absolutely. The potential is clearly there. But, and it's a big but, these individual success stories won't automatically lead to nationwide transformation. Technology is a tool, a powerful one, but it's not a magic wand. For these innovations to really scale and have lasting impact, you need that supportive ecosystem around them. And that requires, well, everyone pulling in the same direction. Farmers, the private sector developing the tools, NGOs helping with adoption and training, and critically, the state playing a much more coherent and enabling role.
So thinking beyond Nepal, what are the key takeaways here? What can other developing countries, maybe facing similar climate and social pressures, learn from Nepal's experience?
I think there are a few really important lessons. First, the need for policy harmonization. That accelerator and brake problem needs fixing, simplifying regulations, maybe creating a single window for permits like the drone example, making sure different government bodies aren't working at cross purposes. That seems essential.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, the importance of targeted investment in the whole ecosystem. It's not enough to just fund the technology itself. Investment needs to go into the enabling infrastructure, reliable internet, stable power, better rural roads, and crucially, into widespread, accessible training and digital literacy programs. Build the capacity alongside the tech.
Right, build the foundations. And the third lesson?
I'd say it's about inclusive financial instruments. We need banks and financial institutions to develop credit and insurance products that are actually designed for smallholder farmers. Products that understand their cash flows, their risks, their limited collateral. Making finance work for the small farmer is key to unlocking investment in these new technologies.
So harmonization, ecosystem investment, and inclusive finance seems like a solid recipe.
Ultimately, I think Nepal's journey is fascinating because it shows how these often quite affordable, adaptable innovations can be powerful tools in fighting climate change and boosting food security really from the bottom up. The seeds for a more sustainable, more prosperous agricultural future have definitely been sown there. The challenge now, the big test, is whether the conditions will be created to allow them to grow and flourish, to really reap a bountiful harvest across the country.